Thank you all so much for being here. We're delighted to talk to you about an issue that we think is very important to the success of women across all sectors, and that is allyship. We know that not everybody has the tools in their respective toolboxes all automatically to know how to be an ally, and so we're going to tell you about the things that you should do, the things you should avoid, and why allyship is worth the gamble in the workplace. So we're going to start, slide please, with a little bit of audience participation. So if you would please give us a show of hands if you've experienced the following behaviors at work. So have you ever been interrupted in the middle of a thought? Lots of hands. All right. Have you ever received comments about your emotional state? Lots of hands. How about having a colleague take credit for your work or your ideas? How about receiving comments about your appearance at work? Also. So a lot of experiences with these, unfortunately. These behaviors are very commonplace, and you may have noticed that they are prevalent, especially with people who identify as women in the workplace. Not only are they annoying behaviors to have to deal with, but over time, when someone takes credit for your work or your ideas, if someone thinks that you're not assertive enough to get your points across in a meeting, they might also get the idea that you aren't management material. And that leads to, next slide please, a phenomenon known as the broken rung. So you may be familiar with the glass ceiling, which is that invisible barrier that prevents women from the highest echelons of leadership in various companies. But the broken rung is an arguably even more prevalent phenomenon that actually happens earlier in a woman's career. It's the promotion gap between entry-level positions and management at all. So that idea of not being management material, often based on biases and stereotypes, prejudices that women have to confront in the workplace, ends up having a significant impact on their wages over time, on their livelihoods, and on their success that cascades throughout their career trajectories. We're going to talk today about an antidote to the broken rung. Next slide, please. Which we're arguing is allyship. So we heard the panelists talk about allyship already. It looks like it can look a lot of different ways. And so my colleagues on the stage are going to talk to you about things that you should do in the workplace to be an ally, some things you should avoid, and some ways that you can take that gamble at work and have it pay off for your colleagues. So I'll pass it over to Tiffany and Molly.
Okay, what is performative allyship? It is actions and gestures that are superficial and with the intent to gain approval and show support for marginalized groups, but they are centered on oneself. People are strongly motivated by their own personal needs with little concern for genuine action. These engagements are easy, visible, costless, but do very little to challenge the status quo. Examples of what does this look like? Well, some examples of performative allyship. One is tokenism, and the picture up here is a good example of that. Tokenism is including members of marginalized groups without substantive opportunities for influence. Think about marketing materials, or look at this example here, where we have a group and we want some diversity. But if you play poker, you know that having this 6 here, it might look good, but it's not going to help you at all with the winning hand. Selective support is another example of what performative allyship is. It's support only of certain aspects of a cause. This month is a great example of that with Pride Month. You're going to see lots of flags, lots of rainbows, but what are they doing besides that visible show of support? Selective support is showing those, but with staying silent, like around policies or legislative actions that could actually help those groups. Empty gestures are symbolic gestures with no meaningful action, like changing your social media profile or wearing a pin. And centering oneself. That's where you are The conversations are around your own feelings, experiences, and actions instead of having the conversation focus around this and centered on the marginalized voices. So to paraphrase Charlie from Top Gun, I hope we've shown these examples of what not to do.
All right, so let's talk about how performative allyship can have significant negative effects on you, on your employees, and on the culture within your organization. This deck of cards here, or these 3 cards, if you do play poker, this represents a very bad hand to have performative allyship throughout your organization. So this is certainly not an inclusive list of the negative effects, but these are 3 that I wanted to highlight today. The first one being performative allyship can undermine trust and psychological safety for your employees. What that means is your employees will not feel safe. We talked about this with the panel, to speak up about issues or concerns that impact them personally. They will have a fear of punishment or retaliation for doing so. So that undermining psychological trust and safety is a very big negative effect that I want us all to sort of think about in terms of, are we creating that safe space for our employees that we talked about? It could also signal to your team members, your employees, that their concerns about DEI issues are not taken seriously. Another negative effect of performative allyship, it decreases employee engagement and morale in the workplace. You absolutely will see lower productivity. You potentially could see higher turnover in your organization. And then you also definitely might have difficulties in attracting and retaining top talent into your organization. Another negative effect of performative allyship is it does impede progress on your company's DE&I initiatives. It just perpetuates the systemic inequalities within any organization, and it also will prevent meaningful strides that I know you want to take towards just creating that more inclusive workspace.
And whereas Tiffany was talking about the effects of performative allyship on employees, we are here to address the business community, so let's talk about the bottom line. Performative allyship can lead to a loss of credibility, which can erode trust with your customers, stakeholders, and employees. It can also damage your reputation, and in our interconnected world, news spreads quickly, and this widespread criticism can deter customers and employees. You might lose out on talent from high-achieving employees. And in some cases, it can also lead to legal and regulatory risk if the actions are perceived as discriminatory or if they fail to comply with laws and regulations.
All right, so here's the meat. Let's talk about how do you avoid performative allyship. You're going to take all those chips that you have and you're going to put them all in the middle of the table. You're all in. We love our acronyms. I know we do, so I have another one for you. EASL. E. Start with engaging in genuine self-reflection about how you have made or not made decisions as an ally within your organization. A. Pair your good intentions with meaningful action. Amplify women's voices within your teams, and advocate for process and policy change within your organization. S. Support. Support organizations that are led by affected communities, organizations that are led by women and marginalized communities. E. Educate yourself about the experiences and needs of those marginalized communities that are represented within each of your organizations today. And finally, L. Continue striving to learn and to grow as an ally. Next, I'll turn it to Julia, who's going to talk a little bit more about active allyship.
I know that we all started somewhere and we worked our way up, so take just a second to reflect on your journey to where you are now. Where did it all begin? No two paths are the same, and many of us in this room, we're not done growing and developing, leading, and making changes that will impact those around us and after us. As leaders, you are very visible, and you should be. Those working with and for you should see and hear you being an active ally, Whether you're working in an office or in a virtual environment, your actions are noticed and they are remembered. Step into your power consistently and intentionally. I know that everyone in this room fought and worked tirelessly to get where you are now, so use it. You fought for it, now it's time to act. So how and why? The first thing you need to do is learn. Make an effort to learn about your colleagues and employees. Learn about what's important to them. Learn about their experiences. Learn about their worldviews and their perspectives. Just take the time to learn. Then unlearn. Not that, but unlearn your own biases and stereotypes. Be aware of them. It also means that you have to be vulnerable and you have to admit that you do have them. And finally, relearn. You have to relearn new skills with an understanding that there is an imbalance in opportunity. You have to relearn aspects of leadership and how to lead a diverse team. You don't need to fully understand what it feels like to be oppressed or part of a marginalized group. You do need to understand that you have power. You have the power to lead change. The power to be seen and heard. You are in a position that is on stage at all times. You need to act. And the why. When you think about the workforce and the employees and teams that make up your organizations and businesses, did you know that millennials are willing to take a 15% pay cut just to work at a company that aligns with their values? Did you know that 74% of Gen Zers rank purpose ahead of a paycheck? So as you're recruiting and hiring and growing and developing, are you attracting the future leaders of your business? Because I assure you, they are watching. If you look up the definition of allyship, it is a noun. It's a thing, but it cannot remain to be one. We have to work all day, every day to make it a verb. It is an action. You have to educate yourself, read about someone else's story, take a class or a workshop, listen to a TED Talk on your way to work. Know and be able to recognize microaggressions and actually interrupt them. A good place to start, put your phone away. Close your laptop and focus when someone is speaking. Expect others around you to do the same. Don't allow interruptions while someone is speaking and voicing their thought or idea. You'll be surprised by the value that people can add when they feel safe and heard. Use your privilege. Be a mentor and a sponsor. Learn to listen, really listen, and accept criticism with grace. Do not wait to be taught. Don't wait to be shown. You are and have to be the trailblazers. There is no one to teach you. Don't compare your struggles to others. You don't know how it feels, and that's okay. Do not take credit for others' efforts and work. Instead, lift them up and act to show their value. Expect to make mistakes. Own them, learn from them, and move on. And know that you will make them. Apologize genuinely and sincerely and work to do better next time. When we all work at this consistently, only then will it and can it become a part of our culture. Those around will see you and listen to you, and they will follow your lead, so you have to act now. Take a gamble and go all in. And with that, I will turn it over to Rachel.
All right, so we've talked a lot about allyship, but we'd also like to introduce a concept called advocacy. Allyship is actively supporting people from marginalized groups. And we've talked a lot about how that looks in the workplace, so I'll keep it short. But it looks like providing assistance and support in an ongoing effort, activity, or struggle, or amplifying voices of the oppressed before your own. So now we introduce advocacy. Advocacy is proactively taking action and building relationships within and across groups to drive positive structural change on a systemic issue. I would think about advocacy as a little bit more of a boots-on-the-ground approach to allyship. And what does that look like? It's using your power, position, or privilege to uplift others and taking action in service of a cause and the people it affects to influence decision makers and decision making. That can look like anything from supporting laws to change systemic issues within our legal system, or even writing them in some of our cases for the lawyers in the room. And for those of us who have the power to change the business guidelines within our organizations, or to provide benefits that might be needed for special groups that might not be as well represented in your current state. So how does this look in action? I'm going to give you an example. A woman of color is spoken over in a meeting. What do? As an ally, I'm going to make space for her voice to be heard. I'm going to say, hey, I don't think we heard that thought completely. Would you mind repeating that for us? But as an advocate, especially if I have the power and privilege to be running this meeting, I'm going to create a systemic change that would prevent her from being talked over in the first place. I'll implement something like a raise your hand policy, which is effective both in person and virtually. Or I'm going to delegate one person from each team to speak and make sure that woman is in the rotation for people to speak in the meeting. All right, so how do we actually advocate for the women in our organizations? First, we're going to provide a platform for individuals to voice the support they need from their allies. So we know that speaking up is really difficult, right? But we've just heard that listening is a huge part of being an impactful ally to those in our organizations. But in order to listen, we need something to listen to. So we want to create a safe space for those in our organization to provide us that feedback that we need in order to be a successful ally. But speaking up can be scary, especially when your idea might be seen as a little bit of a wild card within your organization. So we have a couple of ideas of how to provide a safe space for people to give us this feedback that we need. Our first suggestion is to use a company called NAVEX. They're generally for ethics and compliance training, but they also have a sector that's specifically for DE&I. So it creates an easy and safe space for people to provide anonymous feedback within our organizations. Or if you want to keep it simple, you can use what we're calling our fearless feedback box. It's just your good old-fashioned suggestion box. You can put one up in your office, and you can provide a safe space for your remote employees to mail in their thoughts and feelings. The last point we have here is to empower managers to be people leaders. So Ariana talked to us a bit about the broken rung, and that's why this is one of our recommendations for you today. It's difficult for women to even get that first-time leadership role, let alone to climb the top of the corporate ladder. So that's why we're asking for managers to be people leaders. And how do we do that? We make responsibilities like career development, DE&I, and employee well-being as part of their job description and as part of their performance reviews. So often we're really focused on our managers helping us to hit that bottom line financially, but we forget the huge role that they play is to develop their people and to develop their associates. We need to hold them accountable for that, not only when they're getting the job, but also throughout their careers and make sure that they're actually doing that. Another suggestion would be to have ongoing training, as well as DE&I, anti-discrimination, and unconscious bias trainings. So I promise I'm not sponsored, but NAVEX is back. So while we were doing our research, we also found that NAVEX provides a really great opportunity to have full-blown trainings, as well as these micro trainings that you can have that are 8 to 10 minutes. Those are a really great opportunity to bring those things like unconscious bias to light, which is especially important whenever we're doing performance reviews. So oftentimes these managers have these unconscious biases that they don't even realize they have. And then it comes to light whenever these women are getting their annual performance reviews and they're being held back from those promotions and raises that they've worked really hard for and might deserve. So my favorite is just to take these 8 to 10 minute trainings and provide them to all of your associates. Make DE&I an ongoing training instead of a one and done check the box kind of a training. And my last point on here is to give managers time to get it right. So often we pride ourselves on running lean and we lose focus and we make sure that managers are just focusing on that bottom line. However, a big part of their job is to also develop their associates and help to develop the future of women leaders within their organizations. And with that, I'll give it back to Ariana.
Thank you, Rachel. So in closing, next slide, please. We want to give you some takeaways. So first is be proactive. Turn those positive intentions into meaningful impact. Don't wait to be asked, but try to find opportunities that you can be an ally for your colleagues around. You are likely to be in places where your colleagues are not, based on your roles, based on your decision-making power. And so using your position to facilitate other people's success is exactly what we're encouraging you to do. Speak up loudly and frequently. As leaders, your voice can really affect change. And along with that is leading by example. When you are in a leadership position, people are likely to emulate you, to take your lead, so to speak. And so we're encouraging you to really move forward and be an active ally in your workplaces today. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure.